If you like this video, please subscribe, like, and go to training.mammothinteractive.com where we have tons of more videos just like this. Welcome back. In this lecture, we're learning what is the Unity game engine. Unity is the most commonly used game engine for the development of mobile games. It's a tool used by many game developers to create and power games. You can build 2D games, 3D games, virtual reality games, augmented reality games, and even non-games. You can build simulations and applications. Some examples of popular games built with Unity are Temple Run, Angry Birds, and Super Mario Run. Unity is considered a 3D, 2D game engine and a powerful cross-platform integrated development environment for developers. It's cross-platform, meaning it can work for different devices, and you can build games for different devices. And it's an integrated development environment, IDE, meaning it is an app where you can build out your games from start to finish. Unity is a game engine, which means it provides a lot of built-in features for building a game. So instead of having to build your game completely from scratch, you can use some of the tools available in Unity, like for physics, gravity, 3D rendering, building 3D objects like cubes, meshes, models, for lighting, like generating shadows, for collision detection, being able to detect when an object has collided with another object, adding forces, movement, taking in user input. A lot of these things are pre-built in Unity, therefore it's a lot faster to set it up in your game. If you did not use a game engine, then it would take a lot more work to build a game because you'd have to build all of that functionality yourself with code. Unity also has an asset store, which is where you can find assets like 3D models, scripts, code, scenes, and even games and templates. So the asset store is very popular. Unity is an IDE, which means an interface that gives you access to all the tools you need for development. Unity also has a visual editor where you can drag and drop objects into your scene and then change their properties like their position, rotation, their scale, their color. Can they have physics? Can they have collisions? Are they affected by gravity? And more. So that is an introduction to Unity. Of course, we're going to use Unity in this course, so you'll get a lot more familiar with it throughout the course. Join me in the next lecture where we will continue our Unity game engine introduction. In this lecture, we are going to create a new Unity project. So here I have open the Unity Hub. In the top right-hand corner, I'm going to select New Project. Here we have to select the editor version that we want to use. I will be using 2022.2.0 A11. Also make sure that the chip type corresponds to your computer chip. Then we can select a template for our project. We're going to use the 3D template, which is an empty 3D project that uses Unity's built-in renderer. Under project settings, we can set a project name such as our platform game and the location where to save the project. In the bottom right-hand corner, click Create Project and the Unity editor will open. Here my project is now open with the Unity editor. Coming up next, we're going to learn how we can navigate the Unity editor, and then we'll add more to this project. Don't forget to save your project and join me in the next lecture. In this lecture, we are beginning our look at how to navigate the Unity editor, starting with the toolbar, which can be found at the top of the Unity editor. On the left-hand side, we have signing in where we can access our Unity account. We also have a cloud button to open the Unity services window. So if I click there, it will open up my package manager. Here I can update packages in the project. I also have a button for Unity Collaborate, so I can launch via the collab icon. Unity Collaborate. Then in the center we have the play, pause, and step buttons in game view. So if you play the game, that will launch it from the camera view. You can also pause the game and step through to the next frame in the game. So we can play and we can pause or step through. We also have on the right-hand side a button for undoing history. So we can undo actions that we did recently. We also have a search bar where we can search for items and objects in our project, in our hierarchy, in menus, in settings, and more. We also have a Layers tab. This is a drop-down window where we can control which objects appear in the scene view. All right, so we can determine which items we want to be shown and which items to not be shown. We also have a Layout drop-down menu where you can change the arrangement of your views and then save the new layout or load an existing layout. So you can change the layout. All right, so for example, there you go, you've changed it. And we can save it if we'd like to, or we can reset all layouts to go back to the default. So that is how you can use the Unity toolbar. Join me in the next lecture where we will continue learning how to navigate the Unity editor. In this lecture, we're continuing our look at how to navigate the Unity editor, and we will learn how to navigate the hierarchy. With the default layout, the hierarchy is on the top left-hand side of the Unity editor. The hierarchy displays every game object in your scene, such as your main camera and your directional light, which are the two elements created by default with a 3D game. You can double-click on an element to zoom in on it. So if you have an item selected, then you can double-click to zoom in. So if I click on the main camera and then double-click, right, that will zoom in on it. You can use the hierarchy to sort and group game objects. For example, I could drag the light onto the main camera. So now the light is a child of the main camera. I can undo that action with Command Z or Control Z. You can also right-click in the hierarchy and create an empty game object to act as a folder or a group for several game objects. You can also add more objects to the game, such as a cube. You can add effects like a particle system. You can add a light, such as a directional light. You can add audio, such as an audio source. You can add a video from a video player. You can right-click and add a UI, like an image user interface, which will be added on a canvas. You can also add a UI toolkit of a UI document. You can add another camera, and you can add visual scripting. So there are quite a few elements that you can add in different groups. And if you create your own 3D models, or if you get 3D models offline from the web, that is, then you can add 3D models to the game as well. So that is the hierarchy. In this hierarchy, you can, again, click on an object, and that will highlight it. You can also choose whether to show or hide an object, such as our cube. You can show or hide it. We can also select or deselect the object. So that is an introduction to the Unity hierarchy, which lists out all the elements that are in your game. The elements also get added to your project. The hierarchy is just how the elements are displayed. Coming up next, we're going to continue our look at navigating the Unity editor, so don't miss the next lecture. In this lecture, we're going to continue our look at navigating the Unity editor, and we will look at navigating the scene and the game views in Unity, which are the windows that are in the center of the Unity editor by default. First, let's start with the scene view. The scene view is our interactive view into our world. We have several icons available for us in the scene view, starting with the selection tool. So with this, we can select objects that are in our game, and we can focus on them. Then we have our next tool, which is the Translate tool. This allows you to click on an object, such as the cube, and to move it. In a 3D world, you can move your elements on the x-axis, left and right, on the z-axis, forward and back, and on the y-axis, up and down. So you can click on the arrows in the center of your object and move the object in that direction. You can also select between the arrows and move the object in 2 directions at once. So there we have that next tool. Next we have the rotation tool, which allows you to rotate an object on the x-axis, on the z-axis, and on the y-axis. The colors of the arrow tools and the rotation tools correspond to the axis. We have red for the x-axis, green for the y-axis, and blue for the z-axis, which you can see in the top right-hand corner. There's a gizmo that shows you what axis has what color. Next, we have the scale tool, which allows us to change the scale of our objects on one axis or on multiple axes at once. Next up, we have our transform tool, which allows us to transform the faces that we have in the object. So similar to scaling. The next tool allows us to adjust multiple properties at once. So movement, rotation, and scaling. And then we have our last property for the collision, or the wireframe of the cube. All right, so those are the tools available for us on our scene view. To move around or look around the scene view, you can right-click in the world. This allows you to look around the world. You can also scroll forward and back to zoom in and to zoom out. All right, so there we go. We can orbit around. If we want to move around as well, you can use the middle mouse button to move around. So just hold that middle mouse button. If you hold the Alt key and the middle mouse button, then you can look around. So similar to rotation with the right mouse button, but this time we have more flexibility. At the top of the scene view, we have several overlays. These overlays allow for us to have more tools. For example, here on the left-hand side, we have center or pivot. This allows us to change our gizmo handle position toggles. Center will position the gizmo at the center position based on the selected game objects. Pivot will position the gizmo at the actual pivot point of the game object as defined by the transform component. So these are used to define the location of any transform tool gizmo and the handles used to manipulate the gizmo itself. The gizmo being these arrows here, right? So we have center or we have pivot. For rotation, we can also switch between global or local. Local rotation will keep the gizmo's rotation relative to the game objects, but global will clamp the gizmo to world space rotation. Right, next up, we also have our grid icon. So this allows for grid snapping. First, we have grid visibility. So here we can set our grid visual, grid plane, opacity, and move to. Then we also have grid snapping, which we can toggle on and off. And we have the snap increment, how much to snap by. Then on the right-hand side, we have our scene view, our view options toolbar. Starting off, we have the shading mode, where we can select here shaded wireframe or a mixture. So we can select between a few to see how we want to view our game. And there are more advanced and nuanced properties as well. such as miscellaneous, where we can specify the shadows and the lighting. We also have 2D or not 2D. This will toggle on and off. So we can set and switch between 2D and 3D view for this scene. In 2D mode, the camera is oriented looking toward positive Z, with the x-axis pointing right and the y-axis pointing up. So we can use the arrow keys and can adjust the X and Y. We can no longer adjust Z. That comes into play when we are in 3D mode. You'll notice if you click on the different arrows in the top right-hand gizmo, this will change the orientation of where you're looking from at the objects. Right, so you can look at the top, the side, the other side, down, or the default. If you here have your X, Y, and Z. So you can inspect where you want to view from which side, and you can lock that as well if you want to prevent it from being changed. Next up, we have our lighting. We can turn on and off. So if you turn lighting on, this will allow for lights and shading. If you disable it, oops, not that one. If you disable lights, then you will not have the scene view lighting on. With audio, you can also turn it on or off if you want sound effects and music being played from the game. You can also set different effects, like do you want the skybox, do you want fog, do you want flares, do you want to always refresh, do you want post-processing, do you want particle systems, do you want these effects to be rendered? So you can turn those off as well. You can change the visibility for objects. So if you don't want to show objects. Similarly, you can set the camera. So if you have multiple cameras, or if you want to adjust the camera settings, such as not allow dynamic clipping, changing the field of view, copying or resetting the settings, changing the camera speed, you can adjust all of that. So that was the camera. And then finally we have the Gizmos menu, where we have a lot of different features that we can set, options for how objects, icons, and gizmos are displayed. So that is the scene view. Next we have the game view. The game view is rendered from the camera in your app, by default the main camera. So this is how the game will look from the player's point of view instead of the developer's point of view. If you hit play, then you'll be automatically taken to the game view. You can still check out the scene view in game mode, but any changes you make in play mode are temporary and will not be saved when you hit stop. We have several controls in the game view. First off, the game or simulator mode. So it depends on which do we want, the game or the simulator. The game is interactive as a player, whereas the simulator just simulates the scene. Next, we have the display. If we have multiple cameras, we can choose between them. Next, we have the aspect ratio of the game, so we can test the game on different monitors. So versus a small phone and a large computer, you can test out different aspect ratios. We also have a scale slider where we can zoom in and out to examine areas of the game screen in detail. We have play mode behavior, which will describe either focused or VSync play mode behavior. We have frame debugging as well. We can enter play mode, normally maximized or with full screen on display. We can mute the audio in the game. We can see stats about the game, such as the audio and the graphics, where we can see rendering statistics to monitor the performance of our game. And finally, we have gizmos, where we can show certain types of gizmos, which allow for advanced details and inspection of the game in this game view. If you want to increase this game view, you can double click on the game window name, this is going to make the game view full screen. To bring it back to regular layout, just double click on the game view again, that game title of the tab, and this will take you back to the default layout. So those are the basics of the scene and game views that a beginner needs to know. Join me coming up in our next lecture where we will continue learning how to navigate the Unity editor. If you liked this video, then go to training.mammoethinteractive.com. We have tons more content on blockchain, web development, machine learning, and much more. We also have a membership for just $19 a month where you can get access to our 372 course bundle and counting.